The message that he left for me meant everything to me. I clung to it. I listened to it repeatedly in the days after.
Everybody has told me that has lost loved ones, you'll lose the sound of their voice. I've probably listened to the message hundreds of times.
It's available anytime I want to play it back. It's there. I hear it, and I know it. I'm still very fragile to listen to it, and so I'm comforted to know it's there, but I don't listen to it.
On September the 11th, 2001, nearly 3,000 families lost a loved one. The Twin Towers collapsed with such destructive force that only 300 bodies were recovered. But for some families, there is another legacy. Trapped inside the towers, many people tried to make desperate contact with the outside world. Some were able to speak on the phone. Others could only leave messages. Since that day, families have lived with the memory of these final words from their loved ones. Many of these calls have never been heard in public and are featured here for the first time. All are used with the full consent of the relatives, who only now feel ready to talk about them. These recordings shed light on what really happened inside the towers, but they also reveal something more profound about the choices people make in their final moments, who to turn to, and what to say.
Obviously a pretty scary experience. I saw a guy fall out of probably the 91st story all the way down. Okay. Now you can stay on the line with me.
I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
My dog, Coco, wakes me up somewhere approximately 5:30 in the morning and wants to go for a walk. So at 5:30 in the morning, I get out of bed, brush my teeth, throw some water on my face. We walk through the woods for half an hour, 40 minutes. I say a little prayer every single day and talk to Melissa. You know, it's just, I know she's there, I know she's listening to me. I was the last person from the outside world that she spoke to. I'll always remember that. When you fall asleep sometimes at night and you close your eyes, you can just see her face there saying, "Dad, I love you."
On September the 11th, Bob Harrington's daughter Melissa was in New York for just one day. Aged 31, she was a high-powered business executive and was there to oversee the merger of her company. The meeting was on the 101st floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
She was only going to be there that Tuesday. When the merger was done, she was flying back to California the next day.
There's a fire back there. I love you, Torres. I love you. I don't know if I'm going to be okay here. I love you so much.
We found nothing of Jim. He was completely destroyed. So the fact that I'd spoken to him means so much to me. I think that the healing process is ongoing. It's important to let people know what families of 9/11 have been experiencing, what we've been going through, what we've gone through. We still have those memories that we don't want anybody to ever forget.
Jill Gartenberg had just started a family with her 35-year-old husband, Jim. A successful real estate executive, Jim had recently accepted a promotion at a new company. On September the 11th, he had only gone in to clear his desk at his office on the 86th floor of the North Tower.
Saying goodbye, I love you, is the last thing I can remember seeing him walking out the door that morning on September 11th.
We just had a plane crash into upper floor of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center, tower number 1, is on fire. The whole outside of the building was just send every available ambulance to the World Trade Center now.
In the minutes after American Airlines Flight 11 collided with the North Tower, the live pictures were flashed across the world.
We have numerous people trapped.
But those inside were unable to see what had happened. Desperate for information, they made more than 3,000 calls in the first 10 minutes alone.
He says he's at the 105th floor at One World Trade Center.
At the top of the North Tower, 100 people were attending a conference at the Windows on the World restaurant. Among them was 31-year-old Christopher Hanley, who made one of the first recorded calls to 911 emergency services that day.
Yeah, hi. I'm on the 106th floor of the World Trade Center. We just had an explosion.
The 106th floor?
Yes.
106, okay.
We have smoke, and it's pretty bad. We can't get down the stairs.
All right.
We had about 100 people up here.
Do not leave, okay? There's a fire or an explosion or something in the building. All right, I want you to stay where you are.
Yes.
All right, we're there. We're coming up to get
See
you.
the smoke coming up from outside the windows down?
All right, we're on the way. Just sit tight. All right, just sit tight. We're on the way.
All right, please hurry.
Christopher was our only child. It was so special.
To be able to have the 911 audio was really very important. The most emotional, poignant moment for me is when he asked him, "Please hurry," and "Thank you." To be able to have that
Presence of mind.
Under pressure like that, I thought was just remarkable. I was really proud of him. I mean, to be able to keep that cool and request, "Please hurry." I think that was his last words.
The sonic record of that day, the audible record of that day, is essential because the visual record of that day is limited to the exteriors. What we see with our eyes are two buildings in flames. And these calls and these radio transmissions, they show us through sound what we couldn't see with our eyes. They're part of the fabric of the day that we wouldn't know or have any understanding of without this sonic record.
No. Easy. There's a tree in front of my house that was planted the week after Melissa was born. The tree grew up, Melissa grew up, and the tree grew up to be probably the biggest tree on the street. And Melissa grew up to be such a fine, nice, beautiful young lady. Melissa would have been 39 last week. Now the tree is probably 40, 50 feet high. When I planted it, it was 5 feet high and as skinny as 2 fingers together. So, you know, I look out and I see that tree and I just remember the day she was born. September 11th started like any other morning. Woke up, put a pot of coffee on. I was making the bed and the telephone rang. I don't usually answer the phone because having been in construction my whole life, people call up, have a tendency to want you to do a job for them for nothing or give them some advice, so I don't usually answer the phone. But this morning, I did. It was my daughter, Melissa. I knew she was in New York. I didn't know anything that had happened at that particular point in time. Melissa was a little hysterical. I told her, honey, you have to slow down so that your father can understand what the problem is. She got her composure, said to me, Dad, I'm on the 101st floor of the World Trade Center and a bomb just went off. In my bedroom was a TV set. I turned it on, happened to be on CNN. I saw the fire, I saw the smoke. I was heartbroken. She told me the fire wasn't her major concern, but there was an awful lot of smoke. So I said to her, honey, I said, can you see an exit sign? She said, yes, Dad. And I said, well, under all the exit signs, honey, are stairwells. I said, you get to that stairwell as fast as you can and get out of the building.
But unknown to Melissa and her father, all 3 of the stairwells had been destroyed. Trapped just 3 floors above the impact zone, Melissa would have no means of escape.
She was in trouble, and she called her father for help. I was 130 miles away. There was nothing I could do but give her advice. We exchanged I love yous. And to my knowledge, I was the last person from the outside world that she spoke with.
There's no injuries, but the people are trapped and don't know where you're on the 106th floor of the World Trade Center. All right, we're there. We're taking care of it. Okay.
In the immediate aftermath of the attack, the emergency services were overwhelmed by thousands of calls from the North Tower.
Remain in the location you are, but something by the door to block us.
Stay where you are. We have you on the 92nd floor, southwest corner.
Sure, if you can get out of the building, then get out of the building. If you can't, just remain there and somebody will get you.
How many other people are with you right now? 200?
Morning. Happy birthday.
Wow. Okay, you want to open this? This is Nicole. This was my favorite toy when I was 2. I hope you like it. Natalie.
I think 9/11 comes up pretty regularly in everybody's lives. I mean, you watch television, you go to an airport, anytime you travel. You didn't go to Zita's house? So much has changed since 9/11. Everybody talks about 9/11. It's in the newspapers probably every day. And all I think about when I hear that 9/11 is, I am so proud that my husband did what he could that morning.
Jim Gartenberg had accepted a better-paid job at a new company 4 days earlier. Welcome news, as his wife Jill was pregnant with their second child. September the 11th was his last commute to work at the North Tower.
I went to work soon after he did, and my office is very close to our apartment, so I just walked the few blocks. When I got there, there was a message light blinking, and I listened to the machine right away.
Jill, there's a fire next door. I love you, Jill. I love you. I don't know if I'm going to be okay here. I love you so much.
And that was, I didn't even know what that meant. I listened to the message actually several times because I wasn't really sure what he was saying. I couldn't believe what he was saying. Just a minute later, I spoke to him. Unlike the message on the machine, which sounded frantic, when I first spoke to him, he sounded very calm, very controlled. He said to me, I'm gonna be okay. You know, there's a fire, but I'm gonna be okay. And he said I said, stay down low. I mean, right? What we learned, stay down low if there's a fire. And he stayed down low, and he was hiding behind a desk, and he was trying to call for help, and he had no idea what was going on.
500 miles away in Chicago, Jim's closest friend, Adam, had only just arrived at work.
I turned on CNBC and they said, we go live to the World Trade Center, and there was smoke coming out of the building. The first thing I did was call his office. He picked up the phone right away, and he had a voice that I had never heard before, and it was, just utter panic and fear and expletives. There's fire, there's smoke everywhere, there's debris, I can't get out. You got to get me out of here. He had asked what happened, and he didn't know, and I didn't know.
Jim Gartenberg was on the 86th floor of the North Tower. Although he was 6 floors below the point of impact, Jim and a colleague were trapped by debris as the floors collapsed above them.
His comments were then real calm. Okay, what are we supposed to do? And I told him, there's fire and it's going up, you need to get down. And he said, I can't go anywhere. The stairs are blown out below us. The debris is too heavy. We can't move anything.
It was very unusual that people outside had almost a greater sense of alarm and urgency than the people inside who were in the dark. Families were seeing the billowing smoke and the flames licking up the side of the building. It was just a terrible responsibility for the people on the outside to have to say, it's worse than you think.
15 minutes after the North Tower had been hit, most people in Tower 2, the South Tower, were still at their desks and watching the tragedy unfold. Amongst them was 24-year-old trader Brad Fetchett, who left a message for his mother to tell her he was safe.
Hey, Mom, it's Brad. Just wanted to call and let you know, I'm sure that you heard that a plane crashed into World Trade Center 1. We're fine. We're in World Trade Center 2. I'm obviously alive and well over here, but obviously a pretty scary experience. I saw a guy fall out of probably the 91st story all the way down. So you're welcome to give a call here. I think we'll be here all day, but give me a call back later. Love you.
He was trying to reassure us that he was okay, but you could tell as he cleared his voice when he talked about seeing someone fall from the 91st floor that there was a lot of fear in his voice.
It's available anytime I want to play it back. It's there. I hear it, and I know it, and I'm still very fragile to listen to it, and so I'm comforted to know it's there, but I don't listen to it.
Eight floors above Brad in the South Tower was 42-year-old systems analyst Shimmy Beagleisen.
The phone rang and it was Shimmy. Ma, don't worry, I'm fine. And I said, please don't waste any time. I know all about it, get out. And he said, listen, and he put the receiver up to the loudspeaker, and I heard the announcement, do not leave your office, this building is secure. As we hung up, my nephew called, and he was practically incoherent. He said, Shimmy, Trade Center. I said, Shimmy is okay. And as I said, okay, I never got the K out because I saw the plane hit the other building.
At 9:03, 17 minutes after the North Tower was struck, United Airlines Flight 175 flew into the South Tower. Immediately, the emergency services were flooded with calls, as 700 people were trapped above the impact zone.
Lieutenant, Manhattan Dispatch. Yes, hi. Major disaster, number 2 World Trade Center, requesting everything possible. Northwest Conference Room.
Tower 2, room 105. This is at the World Trade Center. People are trapped. I have a call on the line. The line is open.
What floor are you on?
They're not answering.
We're getting millions of calls there. All I can say to do is stay near the window, stay low, put a towel by the head. The firefighters in the city are on their way over there. I understand that. All right, we're trying to get to people as fast as we can.
Mom, it's Steven. My plane, my building got hit by a plane, and right now it's, I think I'm okay, I'm safe now, but it's smoky. I just want to say how much I love you, and I will call you when I'm safe. Okay, Mom? Bye.
It's a tribute to Stephen that at the moment of his death, it can be said that he was on good terms with every member of his family. And that's not easy. Stephen was with us for 33 years, and we have a choice. We can either say we are so mad that he's not here, or we can say we had him for 33 years. And we have a feast to return to, the feast of the memories. The family came, girl, boy, girl, so there was a little triumvirate at the top. And then 4 boys came in a very quick succession. And Stephen was the third of that group of 4.
Stephen was very relaxed, smiling, laughing.
He was very laid back, very happy. You know, he really was happy a lot of the time.
Stephen was really a peacekeeper within the family because we all have very strong personalities, and at a dinner table we all want to voice our opinion, and Stephen was the best, I think, of any of us, of listening to all sides of an argument and really keeping the peace. That was the role that I thought he played in our family.
He definitely did that, and it's a challenge to fill that role now.
Following a successful career as a college basketball player, Stephen had moved to New York. At 33, he was now a trader with an investment company in the South Tower.
September 11th. It was a beautiful, beautiful day, as everyone always will remember, I know. I was very pleased to be going to a yoga class around the corner in the Village Hall. And at the end of the class, I walked home. And when I came into this house, there was a blinking light on the answering machine, and I had 6 messages. Not the usual thing. And one of the messages was from Stephen.
Mom, it's Stephen. My plane, my building got hit by a plane, and right now it's, I think I'm okay, I'm safe now, but it's smoky. I just want to say how much I love you, and I will call you when I'm safe. Okay, Mom? Bye.
Stephen worked in the South Tower. He was on the 89th floor. He said that he was going to call me and that he was going to be all right. There were messages then from people calling to say, "Anne, are your children all right?" And then there was a message from my husband And he said, promise me you will not turn on the television. And that was an easy promise to make. I just went out in the backyard and I sat in a plastic, you know, those $5 plastic chairs under a tree, and with the phone in my lap, preparing myself for what I would need to face.
Two worlds, you're on the 88th floor, northwest corner. Okay, now, you get soaking wet towels, and you can put them at the doorway. And you're in 2 World Trade, right? You're going to hand the door. Sorry, are you on the 89th or 88th?
Families often have a map in their minds of where their loved ones are in the world. You know, if somebody in your family is working at a place that has now become the center of all the world's attention, and there's a calamity unfolding, in your mind, you're trying to place your loved one. Where are they in relationship to this terrible series of events that's unfolding?
I feel so bad that we can't do more. You don't know. Oh, boy. It's an awful thing. It's an awful, awful, awful thing to call somebody and tell them you're going to die. That's an awful thing.
Just seconds before the South Tower was hit, Shimmy Beagle-Eisen's mother had urged him to leave. Now he was trapped on the 97th floor. By 9:15, the family apartment in Brooklyn had filled with Shimmy's loved ones. The phone passed between them, as each offered him consolation and advice.
We had Shimmy on the phone. We were trying to find different ways how to calm him down and relax him, possibly of different ways of maybe getting out, him trying different exits. At one point when I was talking to him, he shared a few private things with me. He asked me to look after his wife and children. And all this time, I was able to hear in his voice that the situation was becoming a lot worse.
There was now fire and dense smoke above the impact zone. Those trapped there began to panic. Shimmy's close friend, David, called to try and calm him.
Shimmy? Yeah. Just hang in there. Just breathe slowly through the towel. You breathing through the towel? It's fine. Everything's fine. Everybody's fine. Everybody's very calm. Everything's going to be fine. You have to stay calm. Everybody here is calm, I promise you. The girls don't even know because they're in school. The parents are here. They're very calm. Just keep your head straight. Okay, do you see smoke by the window? The fire department wants to... You can't see?
Do we see smoke by the windows? The fire department wants to know. No smoke by the window.
No smoke by the window. Listen carefully. As a last resort, break the window as small as possible just to get a little air in. Okay, but you follow?
Yes.
Okay, how so?
They said the last resort we should open the window just a little bit to get some air in.
Can you open the window or you have to break it? Yeah.
Huh? You have to break it.
Yeah. Okay, Shimmy.
Yeah.
Break the window.
Break the window.
As little as possible. Just get a little air. Just get a little air. Okay. If you're running out of air.
If you're running out of air, we should do that.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm very grateful that he was able to spend his last moments speaking to the people who were closest to him. At the end of your life, I would imagine you want some sort of comfort, and I hope, and it seems from what everyone has told me, that he was given that. That's all I could hope for.
In the North Tower, the first to be hit, Jim Gartenberg had been trapped by falling debris for more than half an hour. Having spoken to his wife, Jill, and best friend Adam, Jim now wanted his predicament to be known to the watching world. He managed to make contact with a reporter at the New York Times, Jim Dwyer.
I spoke with him several times that morning, and I was trying to understand what his predicament was, why he couldn't get to the to the stairs or why he couldn't get to an exit. And he said that, the walls were cracking and folding over, and he couldn't get to where he needed to be. Mr. Gartenberg seemed to be very directed, very focused. I mean, he was, there's a sense of great urgency in his voice, but I didn't feel like he was panicking. He wanted people to know where he was and that he couldn't leave the building.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Nicole. Yay! Yay!
Jim has always been a leader. And I think that showed through on that day.
Get you. Nicole, is Daddy so funny?
When I first met Jim, he was the president of the Michigan Alumni Club in New York. I saw the way that he was running this meeting and the way he was interacting with people and his leadership skills. There was all these qualities about him that all of a sudden I said, wow, this is a really special guy.
After speaking to the New York Times, Jim's next call was to a local TV news program. At 9:32, 45 minutes after the North Tower was hit, Jim went live on air.
Jim Gartenberg joins us. He was on the 86th floor of, I'm not sure which tower. Was it the north or south, Jim?
It's World Trade Center 1, and it's not was. I am here, and I'm stuck right now.
Now, are you above, Jim, or below?
I have no idea. I have no idea where the plane hit. It's my understanding that it's a plane.
Jim, there are two planes. One went into one tower, one went into the other tower. What do you see around you? I mean, are you in smoke? Are you in fire? I mean,
the first thing that I want to make clear is that I'm stuck on the 86th floor. A fire door has trapped us. Debris has fallen around us, and part of the core of the building is blown out.
How many people are with you, Jim?
I'm with one other person, and I'm told that people are aware of this. I'm on the 86th floor on the east side of the building facing the East River.
And what time did you get...
If I'm on the air, I want to tell anybody that has a family member that may be in the building that the situation is under control for the moment, and the danger has not increased. So please, all family members, take it easy.
I got a phone call from a friend of mine on my cell phone saying, Jill, Jim's going to be okay. He was just on national television, and he said he's going to be okay. She told me what he said and how confident he was about it.
They broadcast his voice. I still have tapes of that and listen to it, and it's eerie. The voice that I hear on that is not his, and it's just so odd as far as the voice is concerned. But his message was unbelievably calm and brave and stoic. Having seen that was just a tremendous tribute.
I think for a lot of people to be in crisis mode, they would just sit there and scream. And Jim would kind of regrouped with himself, it seems like, and said, okay, this is the situation, how do I best deal with this? And he reached out to as many people as he could, trying to figure out what resources he had to be helpful in this situation. I mean, he had the sense of mind to do that.
And the danger has not increased, so please, all family members, take it easy.
I think that was wonderful, but I knew in my heart he was not going to be okay.
You guys coming in for building number 2 on the 97th floor, people trapped.
90, what floor? We're all around the building. We're completely around the building. We're into the building now, okay?
2,000 people were trapped in the north and south towers.
By the door to block the smoke and stay where you are. We're sending people upstairs. The fire department's coming upstairs.
Firefighters from across New York were sent to the scene.
They're coming. They're downstairs. They're on the way.
Knowing what he might soon face, fireman Walter Hines left a hurried voice message for his wife.
Message. Hi, Ron, it's me. Just want to let you know I love you and the girls. Tell my mom to, we're going down to that Trade Center thing, the second plane that just crashed into that building. So we're on our way down there. I love you. I'll talk to you later.
Walter knew this was so serious. I could tell from the sound of his voice. He knew this was something he might not get out of. And I think that he just needed to let us know that he loved us. The voice message that Walter left is still on his business phone, which I've kept in his office. I've probably listened to the message hundreds of times. Everybody has told me that has lost loved ones that you lose the sound of their voice, that you can't remember the sound of people's voices after they've gone. And I tend to think that that's true. I think it's a good reminder to have Walter's message for my daughters, that they can continue to hear him.
While some messages provide consolation, others are a painful reminder of a missed opportunity to say goodbye.
I woke up to my telephone ringing. I worked nights at the time, so I didn't want to be bothered. And then my cell phone rang again. And I'm like, I'm not going to answer it. I'd say it was probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon that my cell phone rang with a message.
Saved message.
Neil, it's Brian. A plane crashed into the Trade Center. It's on fire, and I'm in it. And I can't breathe. Tell everyone I love them. I don't get out of here.
End of message.
Brian left that message, and that must have been the first or second phone call that I received that morning. And I mean, I just didn't realize it. You know, it's really hard to struggle with, you know, what would have happened if I answered the phone? You know, but I mean, I couldn't do anything, even if I did answer it. I keep the message on an MP3 file, so I have it on CD, I have it hidden away in a safe, I have it, you know, on every hard drive I have it like everywhere just so that nothing happens to it. It's Brian's last words. I mean, that's one of the reasons why recordings were made, was so people could record their last words. You know, I mean, I think it gives me a little bit of guidance. I like draw from Brian's strength when I hear the message.
Just 3 floors below Brian Nunez in the North Tower was Melissa Harrington Hughes. She was trapped on the 101st floor. Shortly after the first plane had hit her building, Melissa had called her father. But 55 minutes later, he'd heard nothing since.
When we stopped our conversation, I thought she sounded in control of herself, and knowing my daughter Melissa the way I knew her, I didn't think she would have any problem getting out of the building.
Whilst Melissa's father watched the events unfolding at home, her only brother Michael was at his office in Boston when he heard the news.
I just started crying and just couldn't believe it. And really couldn't muster any words to anybody. I kind of had to go back up to work and say, I gotta go. I was just thinking, I hope she got out. I hope she got out. Either by a stairs, elevator, maybe they were gonna bring helicopters, I didn't know. My sister was very protective of me. I can't say growing up I realized it, because as a younger brother, you're always thinking the negative when you're younger. You get mad, you get upset. I don't like you, get away from me, you know, the typical brother-sister thing. But as time progressed, she looked out for me tremendously.
It's, he knew
You jerk, it was working?
No, it wasn't working. But you know what?
What?
It's working now.
The relationship between Melissa and my father when she was growing up, kind of in the teenage high school years, was probably hostile at times. You gotta think, 2 people with the same traits, I mean, both strong-willed, nothing's ever gonna be easy. He was probably the only person she couldn't win against, was my father, and I think her traits came from him. Her drive and her strong-willed.
Growing up, Melissa had always been determined to experience life beyond her small-town roots in Massachusetts.
Melissa spent the summer in France. She had the idea that Paris was the greatest city in the world, loved the clothes, loved the hairstyles. She had long hair. When she came back, her hair was very short. That was a style in Paris. When she got off the airplane, her mother and I looked at her, and we were like, we didn't expect that.
Aged 26, Melissa moved to California to work for a large internet communications company.
Melissa was a very ambitious young lady. When she was in California, she bought a BMW. I was like 60 years old when she bought the BMW. I'd never had a car as nice as that. I said to her, Melissa, can you afford it? She said, Dad, I may never have an opportunity to buy one again. She bought it. She loved it. She wasn't here that long, but she had a wonderful time in the 31 years that she was here. She always aimed for the best, and most of the time she got it.
After speaking to her father, Melissa rang her husband, Sean, in San Francisco, to whom she'd been married for just a year. He was asleep when she called.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. There's lots of smoke, and I just wanted you to know that I love you always.
Melissa met Sean at a junior club dance. That's basically how they started their relationship. He was a very nice young man, and they were an extremely attractive couple.
I could tell when she introduced me to him, her eyes just kind of glowed, and I could tell right away that he was probably the one that she was going to marry, and she did.
Your kiss as a sign of their new married love may present you for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Sean Hughes.
When I heard her message to Sean, I heard in her voice hopelessness. She was telling Sean that this is it, Sean, for me, but I'll love you forever, buddy.
I don't know if I could say it was a good thing. It was good to hear her voice. Good to see that she called her husband. Emotional when you heard it. All sorts of different emotions coming out. Obviously sad because you're assuming when you hear it that she can't get out, but like I said, good emotions because I could hear her voice. It's always good to hear the voice.
An hour after the first plane struck the North Tower, some people were still struggling to make their first contact with loved ones. The phone networks were overloaded. By the time 41-year-old Tom McGuinness managed to get through to his wife, he already knew there was no possibility of escape.
Right away, I said, "Where are you? Where are you?" And I'm almost annoyed because he's not answering me. And then he says, "We're in a conference room that we can't get out of. We're trapped in a conference room." And I said, "Well, who's with you?" And he rattles off the names of a couple of guys I know, 3 guys that were with him, plus these other people. And you could hear it in the background. You could hear people talking. You didn't hear panic. You heard, I remember one guy yelling, "Let's just knock down this goddamn wall." I remember telling him, I said, "You're gonna get out of there." I kept telling him that. And that's when he said to me, he goes, "Ileana, you don't understand." He says, "There are people jumping from the floors above us." And that's when I just thought, oh my God. Like, what are these guys going through that they are seeing what's going on right above them? And it was just unbelievable. And I just kept saying, "You're coming home tonight. You're coming home tonight." And he said, "I love you." And he said, "Take care of Caitlin." he said, I have to get down on the floor, I love you. And that's when I lost the connection at that point. There is a great comfort in the fact that I got to talk to him. And the funny thing about that comfort is it was not a great comfort that day or even, weeks later. But it's a great comfort now. It was a great comfort months later. And the reason it was a great comfort is because, it's not so much for me, but I feel that it was for him. It was his chance to say goodbye, his chance to say, take care of Caitlin. He said, it'll be a miracle if we get out of here. He knew he wasn't going to get out.
In the South Tower, the second to be hit, conditions were now desperate. Stephen Muldery worked alongside a group of close college friends, all former high school athletes. As the fire spread, the group made a collective decision to stick together and try and reach the roof. They now faced a grueling 21-story climb up the stairwells through heat and smoke.
Stephen was passionate about basketball, but he was tiny and slight. I have a picture of him in 8th grade when he was devoted to basketball. And he is standing between two fully grown classmates who were his best friends. And he looks like he's the mascot, and he wasn't. He hung in there. I feel basketball was a critical element in the person he grew to be. He never lost the fire or the desire. I saw it in the aftermath of Stephen's death, when the loyalty of all the people he had played basketball with was made evident to me. And I saw the gifts that had come from the teamwork.
Stephen and his friends reached the top of the building, but the doors to the roof were locked. They retreated back down the stairwells and took refuge in an empty conference room on the 88th floor. Sharing a single mobile phone, each one took turns to say their goodbyes.
Stephen and others passed the phone around and let people get word out to their family members. And at this point, there was a sense of dread among those people making the calls. There was a sense that they were doomed. People used their last minutes of conversation to talk with their families and their loved ones and their friends. They said, you made my life better, I want you to take care of so-and-so. I want you to, know this about the truth of our lives. And it was a kind of a moment of truth for many people, a moment of desperate truth, but also transcendent truth. "65 minutes after the North Tower was hit, a string of desperate calls was still being made from the building. For the family of 37-year-old Jeffrey Nussbaum, his struggle to live is documented in agonizing detail.
My phone rang, and it was Jeff. And Jeff told me that the room is filling up with smoke. It was difficult for them to breathe. He told me the sprinkler systems went off, and they were like ankle deep in water. When you're so emotionally involved, you don't look at your wristwatch. And the phone company sent me a breakdown of his phone bill. I waited over 2 years for him to be identified. So anything is cherishable to me. And what was identified was so microscopic. That you hold on to everything, even the telephone bill.
By 10 o'clock, the rescue operation had made very little progress. The fire department had been blighted by malfunctioning radio receivers within the towers. Once inside on the stairwells, the firefighters could not communicate with them. But that silence was about to be broken.
Someone was able to make the radio receiver work, and we have a remarkable, illuminating document of the effort to get up to the high floors in the South Tower.
Battalion 7 on floor 40 of Tower 2. We got one elevator working up to the 40th floor, staffed by a member of Line 15.
The man who repaired the radio receiver was 45-year-old Oreo Palmer. As chief of Battalion 7, Palmer was amongst the first to arrive at the scene. As he entered the South Tower, he single-handedly fixed an elevator and took it to the 40th floor, halfway to where almost 700 people were struggling to stay alive.
And then he started to climb on foot. And because he was a very, very fit man, he was able to make tremendous progress. He had run marathons, he ran half marathons.
We're on the 43rd floor. There's stairway B. What floor should we try to get up to, Oreo? I'm up to 5'5".
He went 12 floors in 10 minutes, wearing all the bunker gear, which is 50 or 60 pounds.
We're going to have to host it. I'm on 69 now, so we need a higher bank, please. These stairway walls have been compromised on 73 and 74. The walls are breached, so be careful. Okay.
When I first heard Orio's voice on the tapes, you can tell he knows he's in a race against time.
Orio's conserving his oxygen, he's conserving his energy. That's why there's not a lot of chatter on his part on the tape.
During his ascent, Palmer discovered that one stairwell, the south, was still intact all the way to the impact zone and beyond. For the hundreds trapped there, this stairwell could have been an escape route.
What stair are you in, Oreo? South Tower, South Tower.
The 78th floor in the South Tower was the bridge point between living and the dead. It was a transfer spot in the elevator system, and a lot of people had mass there. And when the second plane hit, a lot of them were killed outright, a lot of them were injured and waiting for help. And Oreo Palmer was rising and racing to that point to get to them.
We got two isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. Where you know that? 78th floor, numerous 1045 code lines. 478. That's all here. Numerous civilians, we have 2 engines up here. All right, 10-4, we're on our way.
Oreo got up there pretty quick. Anyone who was wounded or dying, to know somebody was able to get up there, they knew there had to be a way out. The people who were there at the point of impact, to have seen him, I can only imagine there must have been some elation or euphoria that's probably undescribable.
Maybe.
Just to see him and realize there's some hope here, thanks to this guy who just made it up here.
When I heard the tapes, you were watching a screen with all the words on it, but with a digital countdown, so you knew exactly what was coming. You knew the exact minute that the towers were going to go down. And you can't help but feel like you want to jump out of your seat and say, hurry up and get out of there. You know, you have one more minute before it comes down. And that's the hard part. That was the hard part. I was not surprised when I heard that Oreo had made it to the 78th floor. He made it up to the point of impact, and it's amazing. He left a story behind. My kids will have it, their kids will have it, and I just feel that it's to honor his memory and the person that he was.
7 minutes after Palmer's last words, the South Tower would collapse. There is one 911 call which captures this moment from inside the building. It highlights the moral complexity of hearing the suffering of those trapped. From the 105th floor of the South Tower, father of three, Kevin Cosgrove, was still speaking up until the moment when the tower fell.
His words haunt me, and I try not to think about it, but it's also, in a way, kind of a comfort to know where he was and what he went through and what he was trying to do. And not many people have that.
Parts of Kevin's call were deliberately made public when it was played by the prosecution in the trial of a key 9/11 terrorist. It was used to illustrate the human suffering on that day.
The first copy of it wasn't cleaned up at all. There was a lot of background noise, and it was hard to hear what he was saying. And it was certainly hard to listen to him not being able to breathe very well.
Smoke, right there, 105, 2 power. All right, sit tight. We'll get to you as soon as we can. There's some staying up, the smoke's really bad, man. It's barely leave. That's all we can do. Where are you? What floor are you guys up to? We're getting there. We're getting there. Doesn't feel like it, man. I got young kids. I understand that, sir. We got lots of people up here. I understand. I know you got a lot in the building, but we're up on the top. Smoke rises, it's really good. We're on the floor. We're in a window. And then I had to barely breathe now. Can't see. Okay. Just try to hang in there. I'm going to say this to you. So you're in an air-conditioned building. It's really bad. It's black. It's arid. We're young men. We're not ready to die. I'm Hello? Hello? We're looking at financial center. 3 of us, 2 broken windows.
His building began to collapse. It was the first one to fall. Some people said, you know, hearing Kevin's words has made the events of 9/11 more human for them, that there were really people in there and it wasn't just buildings. One lady called him the voice from the towers. It made it real for her, that it wasn't just a news story. It seemed like it was just a movie, but then when they heard Kevin speaking, realized this was a real thing with real people inside.
For Wendy Cosgrove, there is comfort from the fact that almost 10 minutes of the call were not played in court.
I'm glad that I have some that are just my own private memories that I don't have to share with the world. Because it is rather hard to share my husband's last words with the entire world. So it's nice to have something a little private. I guess what I would want people to learn from listening to the recording is that life is short, that you never know when you're going to lose your loved ones, and to spend every minute you can showing them that love. And that's what's important in life.
After 62 minutes, the South Tower, although the second to be hit, was the first to fall. Almost 1,000 civilians and firefighters died. Along with Kevin Cosgrove, they included Brad Fetchit, Shimmy Beagleisen, firefighter Walter Hines, Battalion Chief Oreo Palmer, and Stephen Muldery.
The phone rang, and it was Amy, my youngest daughter. And the first thing I said to her was, "Where's Stephen?" And she didn't answer. There was just silence.
I got home and I called my mother, and she was so happy to hear my voice. And I told her about Stephen. And I just know she just screamed, and that was it.
She knew he was gone. And a sound came out of me that I'd never heard in my life. It was just an animal sound. And I knew when I heard that sound for the first time in my life, that howl, that it was universal. And that, you know, my family and I had joined all the losses of all the ages.
Mom, it's Stephen. My plane, my building got hit by a plane, and right now it's, I think I'm okay, I'm safe now.
The message that he left for me meant everything to me. I mean, I clung to it. I listened to it repeatedly in the days after. But I did put it aside at a certain point and say that I would not continue to do that. And a very odd thing happened, and it is that as time went by, I created a new message that had never been left. I added to what he had left, thinking he had left it. In his message to me, he said, "I'll be all right, and I will call you." In the message that I then began living with, you know, maybe a year after, was, "I'll be all right, and you will too." I made him say it in my memory over and over and over again.
George, have them mobilize the army. We need the army in Manhattan.
Right, all units stand by. Everybody try to calm down.
Although the first to be hit, the North Tower was still standing. For those with loved ones trapped inside, the collapse of the South Tower was a terrifying premonition.
When the first tower went down, I was hoping that Melissa had gotten out of the building. I knew she was not in that tower.
We need additional units. Urgent.
Dad really wanted her to call back. Sean had told us that she had called him. He really wanted her to call back again. And just nervously anxious was the way I viewed him.
As a parent, you always want to have hope. I thought that if there was a way to get out of the building, that Melissa, at that point in time, that she would have been out of the building.
I was on the phone with one of Jim's friends when the first tower collapsed. All you could hear if you listened in on the call was just crying and wailing. And then this, after about 5 or 10 minutes of that, this sense of calm that, oh wait, that's not his tower. It feels strange to report on the events of that day, that we just isolated Jimmy's safety and how we could distance ourselves from the horrific event and the casualties that everybody else faced. But that felt like our duty.
My parents were down in Florida on September 11th. They were not watching television until I told them to turn it on. My father was counting the floors to see, because he saw it on television. He was trying to figure out if Jim was above or below where the plane had hit. The first thing my father said to me was, he was such a great father. You know, and I said, that makes it real, because for me to think he's not going to make it out is one thing, but for my father to say that, because if it's in the past, that made it real, more real for me, that this was really, his life was ending.
At 10:28, 102 minutes after it was hit, the North Tower fell.
I saw the tower fall. Yeah, I saw the tower fall down. And I knew for sure I'd never hear from him again. I saw his life end right there.
I felt, you know, my heart had been ripped from my body. I can't ever remember feeling that sadness ever in life, or that much emotion and tears, and nor do I hope I ever will.
My wife Beverly was working, teaching school in Chicopee. I had to drive to Chicopee to inform my wife that Melissa was in the North Tower. We were listening to the whole thing on the radio when we were driving back, and on our way home, the North Tower collapsed. My wife asked me to shut the radio off. I shut the radio off, and we came home and cried together.
When the North Tower collapsed, 1,402 civilians were killed. Along with Melissa Harrington Hughes and Jim Gartenberg, they included Christopher Hanley, Brian Nunez, Jeffrey Nussbaum, and Tom McGuinness.
The question really about the Trade Center is, what are our memories made out of? Are they made out of images and myths? Are they made out of the hard facts? The audible record of that day is essential, because if history is going to be a tool for the living, if memory is going to be something that we can rely on, then you can't blink, you can't turn away. You have to say, this is what happened, and this is how it happened.
For the families, the pain of September the 11th may never recede. But now that several years have passed, they are beginning to understand the profound legacy of their loved one's final words.
My mother is very philosophical. She doesn't get stuck by something like this. I think she recognizes it and it sort of absorbs it and tries to make the most of it, and she looks forward. So she's doing well, I think.
The world doesn't stop for every tragic loss of life. And, you know, I kind of wish the world could. The world gets too busy, And I understand. You can't. You'd be in constant grieving. It's too easy for me to fall into a place where life is only about endurance. And I think that's a very poor way to live life. It's ignoring all the gifts you're given. And I didn't want to be that way. I didn't want to be that way. And, you know, I can say that I don't think I have.
Jim called me, you know, instantaneously as soon as it happened. His first response was, he needs to talk to me. To have his voice, just to have his voice it's nice. Even though it's panic mode, it's some last memories.
Good job, Nicole. Keep going.
When Jim passed away, I was 3 months pregnant. You know, here I am with this special gift, as far as I'm concerned, that he left me with. And to me, that's so important that we had that. She has his personality, she's quick-witted, and her sense of humor is just like him.
You're fast. Good job.
So knowing that, you know, she's such a part of him, and that my other child's such a part of him, it makes me happy, that part.
I was the last one from the outside world to talk to Melissa. We were able to say how much we loved each other, and I think of it constantly, all of the time.
Ever since Melissa's passing, I don't want to put a good spin on it, but it's changed him. It's made him more aware of things, I should say. He's a more loving man now than he was before. Didn't show his feelings as much before, and now he does. Like with my son, who was, coincidentally, which was kind of fate, I would have to say, was born on September 11th.
When you leave the face of this earth, all you leave are your children. That's your legacy. Melissa brought a lot of joy into our lives. My inner peace with Melissa's death might come from the fact that I spoke to her. I find a lot of pleasure knowing that Melissa called me, knowing that we were able to say our last goodbyes, basically. I got to talk to Melissa in person, and I'll take that to my grave.